Svitlana's smart moves with Svitlana Demchenko. Hi.
Hi, Arne.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you at home. Thanks for tuning in. All the things we're talking about today you can see in the description in the YouTube link. It's going to the ChessBase news article where we are talking about the smart moves of today. I know already, because you announced it, we will talk about a kind of special opening, but I'm still not aware of what this opening is. All I can see is we're black. Now you can reveal everything.
Yeah, I wanted to teach a bit of an offbeat opening today,
Great.
and it's called the Two Knights Tango. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, cute. No, but I guess it's a game which involves both of the bishops. Okay.
Exactly, except knights.
Two Knights Tango. That sounds nice. So yeah, okay. Already a nice name for that. Let's go for it.
So
What do we do?
I will go to the starting position, which is d4, knight f6, c4, knight c6. This is
All right.
how it starts. So the name I use for it is Two Knights Tango. Sometimes people call it Black Knights Tango. And also, it's called the Mexican Defense in some
Okay.
in some sources.
Funny.
But to me, Two Knights Tango sounds the nicest, and that's what I heard most often.
That looks very peculiar and very nice, and I love offbeat openings, and hopefully you at home are enjoying those too. Also, it looks, for me, at the very first moment, it looks quite safe and solid. There's nothing which is really looking too crazy. Of course, very tempting d5, and then we are jumping around with the knights, which is probably the creation of the tango word.
Yeah. So this opening, we don't see it too often in classical chess, but it's completely playable, and there are a lot of good players that play it, especially online. So I often see, like when I open the highest rated players who have played it, it's a lot of people who have, except they play it in Title Tuesday, right? Like Caruana, Nakamura, and I see all these games in Title Tuesday that they play. And one of the best players that I could find that plays it quite a bit in over the board chess is Bologan. And we'll see after we go through a bit of the theory. We'll see if we have time to see one of his games. And so to me, he's the one person that has played it the most in over the board chess. So this opening is fairly uncommon, but it's positionally more sound than most strange openings that that we have. The reason for that is because it's it's highly transpositional to other structures. So there's a lot of variations we will see that transpose to either the King's Indian or the Nimzo. So not exactly transposed, but very, very similar pawn structures. So technically, if you play one of these two already, there are a lot of lines where you can go back to your usual pawn structures and positions that you know. So for this reason, it's like a very playable opening, but it's not really seen as often because, of course, some lines white can have a slight advantage, but it's never anything that's really big. And I'm always really happy when I find a non-popular opening that is actually doesn't give up too much advantage.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to mention that Viktor Bologan, of course, is one of our most beloved Fritz trainers. He has made some sensational opening videos, and I will post one also in the ChessBase news article, since you mentioned Bologan right now.
Yeah, he's the one who I could see the most games out of the top players that he plays it over the board. So here at this position, the starting position for the Two Knights Tango, white has pretty much three moves that they play the most often. One of them is, as you mentioned, d5. And the other two are knight f3 and knight c3. So we can start with d5. So this is the most tempting one. And this is kind of the point of the whole two knights tango. Black is usually very happy with this because the whole idea of the opening is we want white to push pawns and overextend. On this pawn push, we're going to play knight to e5 and attack the pawn on c4. So white needs to defend it somehow, and the best move to play is e4. So this is the main line. But there are a few other moves which we can still look at. e3, which is less ambitious, leads to an equal position with e6. So we still need to take a bit of the center like that, and we're going to play bishop b4. So this idea you will see a lot, to play e6 and bishop b4 for fast development and castling right away. Also, one of the main ideas of the two knights tango is that we have the faster development after we've given up the center a bit. So all of our pieces are already developed and the king is safe. So this is one of the sample lines, completely equal position, and from there on, you just play on. If white defends it in a different way, we still play e6. So the very common ideas are also to play bishop c5 if the knight isn't on c3 yet. So that's another way to develop that bishop. And in case of b3, this is already not as good, I would say. So this is just one of the ways that you can quickly maybe even get the initiative on your side. It seems like a normal move to defend the pawn, but already not the best. So here we have e6 once again. So that's the common theme in these d5 positions. We will see more King's Indian approach in some other variations. And it could even get more exciting and tactical in some lines where if the opponent takes, you don't even have to take back. It's a bit of like strange lines with the bishop c5. Wow. You could also take here and it's going to be equal. But I looked into these bishop c5 moves and they're very tricky. For example, taking on d7 is already very bad because f2 is going to be under attack. The bishop is joining. And
yeah, I mean, there's four of the minor pieces are already on the board for black and none on white side. Now there is a knight, but that is of course very funny.
Yeah. So already black would be winning here for just the price of a pawn, but that's more of a tricky variation. So for example, you can just castle and try to open up the f file next, but there's also lines that are approximately equal. Maybe I would say black is even slightly better.
I even thought you would take with the king here.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's gonna work here, but yeah, here we take with the knight and then castle, pressure on f2. So nice. I would think black is already taking over the initiative.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of how this b3 move it could be just a bit too slow, but of course, if you don't want to do all that, you just take back with the f pawn and play a normal game.
Just continue, yeah.
So the best to do here for white is e4, and I think if you play online, chess, most of the time people are going to play d5 because they see this weird opening. Maybe they've never seen it before, and the reaction is right away to punish it with. Like, they gave up the center, so then that means you need to take it. And in some lines, as I said, I'm usually happy with these d5 lines because we get some nice squares, but it's still something that's worth knowing. So e4 is best, and the trick here is that white
probably doesn't work, yeah.
Can win a knight in case you take it, so that's the trap that white is going for, and we're not going to take that pawn, but instead we're going to play e6. So just remember that on these d5 lines, our idea is always e6.
Yeah, e6 seems to be the absolute, that little bit of a center destroyer move, right? And it opens up the bishop line and you can castle and you have so many pieces outside already. So interesting concept.
Exactly.
Like it.
So sometimes the bishop can go to c5. Sometimes the bishop can go to b4. In case of knight f3, we can, for example, take it if you want to make some trades and play bishop b4, just a quick development. That's just an example of a line that you can go for. You're ready to castle and the opponent is still a bit in the center. But I think the most testing line, the one we haven't looked at yet, is f4.
Yeah.
Because that one looks
that's my style.
scary.
It does.
Yeah, that's what you would play probably. And that one looks scary. So e5 that's if the person is just completely going for the center and trying to destroy your knights, but it's not going to work. Nothing is going wrong here. So the knight thankfully does not get trapped because we always have this bishop b4 check.
Okay.
And now they need to decide what they want to do. For example, even we don't even have to take it. We can play f5. So
yeah,
that's
f5 was my main idea now. Yeah.
Yeah, and now we can even take back with the queen.
Oh, that's nice.
So the knight is untouchable because we are going to take and win back some material here. So that's an example of what happens if white develops. If white doesn't develop and just pushes pawns too much, and it's not that dangerous to us if you know this line and you know that your knights are safe there in the center.
Good point. Okay.
So that's pretty much it for the d5 line. Do you have any questions about this one? Was there anything that looked scary that I didn't?
I was wondering, no, just the sideline. What about f4 in the next move already instead of e4? So I guess you go to g6.
But you can take the pawn.
Okay, so now the question is this a sacrifice if you play e4 now, right?
Yeah, so the reason why we looked at moves like b3, e3, e4, queen c2 is because it's very natural to defend the pawn.
Yeah.
So I would think that here we're just going to go back to b6 and
after e5 you go to e4 again. Is it working?
No, but now there's this pawn on d5 hanging, so I would just take it.
Oh.
And be up 2 pawns. So I would say this is fine.
Yeah, that is actually really fine.
E6, good. Maybe d6, whatever you want to do. I think a pawn is good enough. Maybe some compensation.
Yes. So, okay, yeah. But of course, for you at home, play with us on the board, on the sample board. Once we're done with the whole video, and once you have all those variations which you're thinking of, you know how to use ChessBase, you know how to analyze, you know how to look at the big games, you know how to give jobs to the engines to check a bit further. If this looks interesting, if the patterns look good for you, this is what you should do. Put it in your repertoire and check it out. Yeah, but this concludes the d5 line, so that looks pretty nice. I would probably fall for it. Maybe I did it already. But I rarely play d4, so yeah.
Yeah. So the other two moves that are the most common are the knight on f3 and the knight on c3. So people will probably try to play it in a normal way that they play their actual main opening. d5 is just for people who want to kind of punish it and right away take more center.
Challenge this.
Also common to do. So let's start with probably knight to f3. So depending on your style, here you actually have a choice. You can go for either the King's Indian setups or the Nimzo Indian setups.
Okay.
So either to go with e6 or d6. And you have that choice on move 3. I'll say that the engine prefers the e6 setups. So a sample line could be to go for something like that. Take out the bishop, play d6. These positions are very common in the Nimzo, I would say.
Yeah, that looks quite familiar again. So you kind of transposed into the Nimzo line like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's an exact transposition because sometimes our knight isn't out yet.
Exactly, yeah.
And then we take it out. So yeah, but this is very, very similar. And then you follow through the regular Nimzo plans. Sometimes white could try to stop it. So if they played knight f3, they might want to avoid these Nimzo positions, especially in this unknown knight c6. And in that case, you now cannot really develop your bishop anywhere here. So you would just need to go back to the King's Indian setups and play d6, g6. And then your bishop goes there. So the bishop just had no choice on this diagonal anymore. So we're going to the King's Indian. And you can also play King's Indian on move 3. So as I said, computer likes the other one better. So in this one, it gives white like an advantage, a bigger advantage than in the Nimzo lines.
Huh.
But it's kind of also it's the same as you know how the computer gives the advantage to white in any King's Indian position.
Well, yeah.
So that might be the same story here. So I'm giving an example of a line that is actually super similar to the actual King's Indian. So, for
Okay.
example, we develop as we do in the King's Indian. Another important thing is to not get your knight like trapped anywhere in the center. So if at that point they go d5, you can just return to b8 and basically play e5 now. And we are back to our normal King's Indian positions, except the knight is on b8 rather than on e7, if you know what I'm talking about, how white goes d5 and then the knight goes to e7 in some lines.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exactly the main lines of the King's Indian, except the knight is on b8. Sometimes this is actually better. Sometimes this is worse. So the knight on e7 is not always black's greatest piece, and now it can go to d7 and support the position in other ways.
I have to remind our viewers who weren't watching our episode about the King's Indian, please check it out. It's in the playlist. It's a very, very popular episode. People
We have even two, I think.
Yeah,
because
true.
Because
exactly.
I like the King's Indian that much.
Yes, we have 2 episodes. Thanks for reminding us. Absolutely. Yes, there was a lot to cover. Yeah, so check that out, please.
Yeah, so plans are exactly the same. So if you are a King's Indian player, why not exactly the same plans that you already know, except you confuse the opponent a bit in the beginning. So as I said, you see, no, you don't see the evaluation. It's plus minus in
okay,
not plus equal, but plus minus like that. But that's the evaluation you have in the King's Indian anyways.
fair enough.
So that's what I would say for the King's Indian players. And if not, you can start with e6. There, the evaluation is not that big. But I don't care about the evaluation when I play the King's Indian because I like the positions and I like the tactics that arise. So that was knight f3, also pretty brief.
Now I need to ask you one last question about the knight f3, and probably the same will apply to knight c3 after all. So after e6, what would happen when white plays d5?
So here I would assume that we are taking it.
Takes back.
Taking back.
And then the knight e7?
Now the center is not that strong. So what I would do in such position, if I don't know the theory, I would first verify if the aggressive moves such as knight b4 work. And then if the knight gets trapped or something, then I would just go back to b8. But I think that here it should be fine. My concern is there some sacrifice with e4? But I personally don't see it. So probably there is not anything.
Okay.
And if you don't play that, then then d5 is not really that dangerous.
I'm a bit worried about a3 at one point, but okay. But this you can also check out at home if, just in case. This is a thing which sometimes stings my eye, and I'm thinking like, but that's my whole concern about all the modern openings, about any fianchetto, about every knight which is outside that, because I'm the one who's always attacking with the pawns, and then sometimes I probably just get lucky, and then I
would play c6 here. So
c6 is nice,
to challenge the center, and the knight is not really trapped.
True, there's no check, there's no trap for that. Okay, good.
So usually the way to deal with, if you haven't if the opponent plays a line that you haven't looked at, it's probably because that line is not the best, because you would have looked at the best one. And that's how you know that you can that's how you know that there's something wrong with the move that the opponent played.
If it ever happens, you just know, like, okay, it must be something wrong. I can get out of there. I just have to calculate this, and I might have a better position. I got you.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's losing or anything. So it might just be that the opponent gave up the advantage, or maybe is slightly worse now. But you just need to think about why this is not the move that is normally played. Yeah, and in this case, it's because it's weakening the center, so maybe there's something you can do with that d pawn, and that's how you get to the conclusion of knight b4.
Mm-hmm.
That then you calculate that it's not trapped. So that's how I try to play it over the board. If the opponent plays something I didn't expect, you just figure out what's wrong with their move.
Very good. Good tip. Good advice. C3,
Now,
that's kind of the ultra main one, right?
yeah, I would say this is probably the main, yeah, the biggest line,
Mm-hmm.
and what most people would play. I think this is the most popular. So here we are having a different idea than in the two previous lines. We're playing e5.
I like that.
So yeah, I also like these ideas, and they often transpose to my King's Indian stuff. So basically, actually, the engine says that d5 is the best move here, and then tells you to play like this. But
Go
I
back
would say
to
that it has
territory which the engine knows very well.
Yeah, the engine really likes the space, but I would say there's no point in doing this, because if you wanted to play d4, d5, then play it on the first move.
True.
And the knight is just weirdly placed on c6 here. That's not how we normally set up these d4, d5 positions. So, although sometimes the engine will say that this is best, but the difference in like 0.1 doesn't make a difference to us. So we are going to play the line with the most ideas in it, and this is also the most played line. So even the good players that play this line, they play it with this, not with d5, because there's no point in going d5 there. So this, on e5, of course, white could take it, but that is not really a problem at all. That does not give white an advantage. We're just going to take our knight, and this is even better because now white doesn't have space. It's just very good version. Maybe it's even like Budapest Gambit kind of, except you didn't even gambit that pawn, and you just got your knight on e5 right away. So here there's only pretty much one line to know, which is knight f3, white's best move. And here we're not, at least I don't like that move. I like the move bishop d6. That's what that's my computer liked best. It's a weird move. I would have never thought of it.
Super interesting.
But it was a weird move. So knight c4 is kind of what I'm wondering why we're not taking that pawn. So if the computer doesn't recommend taking that pawn, that's probably because white gets the counterplay with e4.
Trouble, maybe.
And now the knight just has to go back. And now maybe at some point white is going to play e5 and kind of...
yeah, the initiative is for white, but then again, is it worth the pawn? That's the question. Probably it is.
Yes, if you want to do this is probably also okay if you really like pawns. Yeah, I would probably rather go for this line where it's more initiative for us. Yeah, this is the one that is also fine. Actually, there's a lot of moves, because d takes e5 already, white gave up the advantage. So in these lines, you can kind of do whatever you want as long as it's like tactically working out, and you'll be fine. Like, you're not risking to be in trouble. So I just found this bishop d6 move and thought it was funky, so I looked into it, and we could maybe not knight c4. I was trying to make knight c4 work, but we can play it like that. We can calmly castle at some point and just play this position. Many other moves here, because this is not really a common thing that white does. They are not going to take here. You're just going to have no problems. That's all.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm also thinking of like one last thing is that I'm thinking of when takes and when the knight goes to f3 and the bishop goes to d6. What about the sacrifice on c5? Of course, you should never take with the bishop, but now you just give the check, which is like forced.
Exactly, and then you can take the
pawn. Go to
Yeah. So I also looked at the c5, but it's not
good.
It's not really working, and we win the pawn. So So yeah, that's just an example. These lines you can play anything because you're already equal.
Mhm.
Now there's also e3, which I would say is not that great, but it could be played to protect the center. Here, black is going to develop in the regular way with bishop b4. So basically, whenever you can play bishop b4, like it's either bishop b4 or bishop c5 in this opening. So if both of these squares are taken, then you have no choice but to like fianchetto the bishop with our King's Indian setups.
Yeah, which other
If
people
you
might prefer even more, but I'm also
yeah
for this variation here.
Yeah, no, but in this one, there wasn't really a choice just yet because we started with e5.
Yes.
We didn't choose between e6 and d6. Here we actually had a choice to take the center a bit more.
Gotcha.
So this one is, I would say, just like a pretty bad Nimzo that I don't understand why white went for it. No, it's not bad. Like, sure, it's equal. But compared to what white could have had, it's bad. So, for example, these positions, they might look strange at first glance, but if you actually like play the Nimzo, I would say that this is very, very comfortable with these doubled pawns. Sure, you gave up the bishop, but just as an example, these two pawns are just pretty horrible. You're gonna play bishop a6, knight b7, knight a5. Like that's why the knight is actually pretty nicely placed here. If anything, knight can also go to c5, and you just target these pawns with your knights and your bishop, and the bishop pair is not really relevant here because the position is very closed. So I would love to play these positions that black is already better, and you just push until you win the c4 pawn or the c3 pawn. So although knight d8 looks passive, it has very good prospects later in the game.
Okay.
So e3 probably will not be played too much, but if it is, then you know that you can sometimes trade. You can sometimes trade it, preferably after white played d5 and committed to this pawn structure. So probably the most ambitious line is going to be d5 here, and here, where do you think our knight is going?
So we definitely, no, it's not definitely. Well, we really have many options, which is interesting. I think there's no like terrible option. Probably e7 might be the. Even that is working. I don't know. I think d4 is totally fine.
Ah, okay. d4, that was not one of the. That's not one of the moves. No. The main move is knight e7. Like the other ones, like knight b8 is a bit more passive. Knight d4, I'm just a bit worried about that knight. Maybe it's not that bad, but I'm still worried. Even about g4. Even g4 is making me worried. But yeah, I don't know where the knight is gonna go. Knight h4. I mean, if you want to continue with the Knights Tango, I don't know. It's not that bad. Like you're not losing the knight. Okay. Yeah, it's not bad, but definitely the main move is not knight d4, just because it gets kicked out and tossed around.
Yeah, it's a bit too wild, maybe.
So knight e7 is the main move, and after e4, which is how white is normally going to play this. I don't see a reason why they would play otherwise once they've already picked this pawn structure. And now the knight is going to g6. And
there we have it.
It's going to have a nice square on f4 in the future, and that's where the knight belongs here.
Yes, so, otherwise they can't dance tango, so
yeah,
they have to be next to
each other. They're still together, and it's nice. Now the bishop also has its ideas with c5 and going to b4. Yeah. So now white has one best move, which I think is very hard to actually understand. Okay. But how would you, I'm just really curious. What do you think, how would you play as white? There's two good moves, I would say, that are actually worth, that give white an advantage. There's two moves, and the rest are just equal and very comfortable for black. What would you play for white?
So I would go so I have two options for me. One is f4 if I want to, because I think those sacrificing plans could maybe work. I didn't calculate it yet, but it looks tempting. And the other one is bishop g5. I think as white I have the chance to castle long in only a couple of moves. I might even just trade it with the knight on f6, the bishop, if it gets attacked. And yeah.
Okay, so that's these two were not the top two moves,
Not
as
even
it
close.
usually goes. f4, I want to just kind of refute it, at least. So I actually think I can simply take it, and like there's never any e5s. So
is it not? No, okay.
I wouldn't.
So
think
after knight f3.
Oh, you want knight f3? I thought you wanted to get back the pawn, but you don't want the pawn back.
No, I don't want the pawn.
I mean, can I not just develop my bishop, and then if you ever play e5, I'll play queen e7?
And
maybe
I
not
would
queen
play
e7.
queen e2, but probably. Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, but that was just I think I will get the pawn back at one point, and I don't know. I'm just annoying.
I don't trust e5 at all. Like I don't trust it at all. Maybe knight g4, and I just want to win that pawn.
Actually, that's a crushing move.
And also knight f2, knight e3.
Knight g4 is a crushing move. I don't
Yeah, so I think f4 could get refuted by just taking it. Bishop g5, I see no problem with it. This was also not one of the moves I analyzed because it wasn't one of the popular ones, but I'll just kick it out.
Yeah, I think I would just swap and yeah.
Yeah, I'll take.
And then the queen to, I don't know, f3.
So the reason I like this is because knight is coming to f4 and you have no dark squared bishop. And looks good.
That is
queen
good,
f3.
Yeah.
I could trade. I could also run away and
and now
play,
the castle. Yeah. So
play here.
Then there's there's a bit of an
So
I don't know. Yeah, it's not convincing for white. No. I have to admit.
It's fine for white. It's not the line that fights for an advantage.
No.
I've seen some games where white does go for the long castle, and usually I'll say it's not the best way to castle.
Okay.
Although it looks shorter, but I saw some of like Bologan's games, and I was just looking at the games in this line, and usually whenever white castled long, there were some b5 ideas, and like it got opened up quicker than the king side, at least from the games that I saw. So, Engine's best move. Are you ready to find out what it is?
Now I'm curious.
It's a3. So, no one's gonna play this. It's hard to understand.
Well,
and it's not the most popular.
Stops the bishop, I guess, and
yeah, it stops the bishop, and it's pretty annoying because on c5 they're gonna play b4, and on b4 they just defended it. So the whole point is to make that bishop's life hard. But I would say that nobody really comes up with this unless they really let their engine sit there and figure out a3. But I think I will come back to this move. Actually, no, I can explain it. So on a3, if somebody does end up playing it, I don't know why they would end up playing it, but if they do, we're gonna still play bishop c5. That's our bishop's last chance to get out before they play b4. And on b4,
we go to d4.
We play bishop d4.
And then there's knight f3 or e2, I guess.
Yeah. Well, knight f3 is.
Oh gosh, our knight is hanging. Yeah. The white knight is hanging.
So the only reason why somebody would play a3 and b4 is if they know the next few tactics, which I think is really, really unlikely for somebody to calculate over the board. I mean, even I was not understanding any of the evaluations. So we're attacking the knight. There has to be a defense, or else we win the e4 pawn.
Yeah.
And now there's a few interesting lines. So there's this knight e4 line, which if you see this over the board, right, you're never gonna play a3 and b4 in the first place. If you see that the bishop is getting here, knight is getting to e4, you just don't want to deal with this, right? You're never gonna play it.
Yeah.
And this line is a bit of a gamble, but that's the reason why the computer likes this line is
Bishop
because
G5? No.
they see this advantage. Nope, they're not even going to do anything about it. They need to play H4 first and start to bother this knight. And now Black's best move is bishop f5, and now White's best move is knight from 4 to g3, not the other one because we don't want to trade.
Yeah.
So they want to keep the most pieces, and this line is like the
Jeez.
plus minus
That's
in
insane.
like this, not like that.
And the
Not
computers,
winning, but it's better for White.
the
Is what I
computers
mean.
did it again. They pushed their A and H pawn forward, and
Yeah, yeah. So that's the reason why this A3 line is the best. Personally, I would not even understand that White is better here. If I had this position on the board for the first time in my life, I would not even understand why White is so much better. But some tactical reasons and
sure, difficult to
yeah,
get the
the
knight out. And
trouble with your pieces, sure, they're gonna get back this bishop eventually, but it's so hard to do this by playing by leaving the bishop there and playing down an exchange for. It's an exchange? Yeah, it's an exchange. I mean, I think it's pretty much impossible for like an average player to understand this. So yeah, so if you somehow get here and you know that this line is, you don't like it, there's also the c5 alternative, which is more of a like longer and complicated game.
Oh.
And here you can also play it that way.
And then h5, yeah.
Yeah. So White's idea is d6. So this is one of the only lines
Ew.
where White is actually better.
That is
Because it's a bit
awkward,
cramped.
Yeah.
You see, it's like it's cramped and whatever. There's some lines that follow, but still, you're like it's a game and you keep playing it. You have a little less space, but still some chances attacking some pawns here. You're gonna attack here in the future. So yeah, unless the opponent is playing with an engine, I don't see why they would go for A3 and B4. Because you would need to know both of these lines in advance, and you would need to not be scared of
Svitlana,
knight.
now you're telling everybody.
Yeah, but the problem is I told everyone that this is the best line. But hopefully
I know.
The opponents are not gonna watch it. No, but still, even if they watch the video and they learn it until here, they still need to win it from here. And I don't know how they're gonna do that.
Yeah,
right? It's from here, it's still gonna depend who's the better player and who plays this better. In such tactical and dynamic positions, usually one move wrong can like give away your whole advantage that you've been earning the last 20 moves. Same for Black, same for White. It's just complicated. So I would say that nobody's gonna play A3. If somebody plays it, then I'll be wrong, but I don't think so. So the more natural move is h4. So this is the other option. I would say the second best that gives White an advantage.
Okay.
Whenever we see h4, I would say that almost an immediate reaction that you should think of is h5. In these positions, that's what we do. We try to lock it because h5 does come with a tempo and we just don't want to deal with that pawn over there. And we want to castle in peace eventually. So now, of course, the computer says that the best line is A3. But why would a person play H4 and then play A3? You know, it's just a bit...
I think, well, from what we have seen, it's just like a different move order, right? After A3
exactly.
and B4.
We can come back to the exact same thing here.
Oh, funny.
And now we play C5. Yeah, now I think knight e4 also works, but as I said, we can just go for one of these lines. So probably more natural is to play bishop g5, but from here on we just play. There's no big issues for Black. We develop our bishop since the opponent didn't play a3, and our bishop is doing fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how we would react to h4. The important thing is to learn h5.
Good, we got this.
The most popular move, the people play it most, is bishop e3. Not sure why. Probably because just you're protecting the bishop from going
I tell you why, because they cannot go to f4. They want to play the London.
Yep, they can't play the London anymore. No, if they wanted the London, they wouldn't have played c4.
Absolutely, yes. It would have gone completely different, of course.
So our bishop, usually, no choice, can't go to c5, so it goes to b4. And now we're playing once again some sort of I was gonna say Nimzo because the pawns are doubled. Yeah, maybe Nimzo. Maybe I mean the structure is more like King's Indian, so I don't know. We're just playing a position that's not really consistent with another opening, and yeah, we're just up in development. We are already castled, so we'll try to open up some files here. Yeah, maybe develop our queen to e5 if they take, and just play on. So it's gonna be fine here. White does not have a huge advantage in any of these lines. As I said, the two lines that give white a bigger, more substantial advantage are h4 and a3, both of which I think are pretty tough moves. h4 is not tough, but there's other moves that you think of before playing h4, such as bishop e3. This is the most played, on which we're gonna make that trade and double the pawns. Second most played is bishop d3. So people naturally just want to develop and want to castle. Here we're gonna play bishop c5. So if our bishop has the option to go there, it does. Now you can even trap the opponent if they play knight g to e2. Do you see why this is bad?
Well, I mean, yes, I can just play the knight to g4.
Exactly.
And get the queen comes in on h4, right?
Yep. Very common trick, right? That's we get in a lot of opening positions. So both h2 and f2 are attacked, and this is just lost for white. So that's a bit of a trap. Most people are probably gonna be smarter and develop on f3, and from there, once again, you just play. Your bishop is developed, your pieces are developed, so everything is good. Now knight g4 doesn't really have that big of an effect. They'll just castle, so there's kind of no point in doing that. You can play d6, castle, later put your knight on f4, and your pieces are all developed, and the king is safe, which is what I like about this line. There is no really immediate danger. The only danger is getting like less space in a bit cramped up position, but that doesn't mean a loss. That's just you just play it on with a bit less space. What else have we not looked at? We haven't looked at knight f3, but this is kind of, it can be consistent with the other lines. You can play bishop c5 or bishop b4. Both of them are working. I usually like bishop c5 because we have some additional tricks on f2. So if white does something that's not good, we can play knight g4 and maybe win on f2. Or just put white's pieces in an uncomfortable position with knight d1.
That's all.
And then we'll castle, play 5 somewhere, D6, and it's looking good.
f5, nice.
Mm-hmm.
And now with this knight out on f3, it's a 4-knight tango out of a sudden.
Yeah, no, but their knights didn't actually do a tango. Yeah. They didn't dance, but our knights did.
Lazy knights. So.
Last one is f3. I don't think it makes too much sense, but they might be just transposing into something that they know. Like maybe they want to play the Samish against the King's Indian. Like maybe, I feel like people just try to play pawn structures that they know whenever they get an unusual opening, because this one has also been played, and there our bishop is really happy on that long diagonal, and yeah, people can try to get that bishop out, but now we're gonna play a5 and prevent it from happening. And yeah, I mean, if that happens,
and there's always like this move, it takes on g1. I mean, it's very special.
Oh yeah, bishop g1. I wasn't even looking at that because I like to keep that. Like that bishop just looks so good that I wasn't even thinking about trading it.
Yes, yeah, I got that.
It looks too good. Actually, black is even like much better here, I would say. So this is good, very good. You don't have any problems. So I think we're done with all the sidelines. That was a lot of sidelines, but it's because it's such offbeat opening. People don't actually know what's best, so they just try a lot of things when they get faced with it.
Yeah,
and that's why there were a lot of lines, but they're all very similar, and the pieces kind of go in the same spots. So I'm done with the theory. Do you have something else?
Absolutely not. That was very insightful. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you have tried it out too now recently, or
No, I mean, I had this, I wanted to play it against someone in a classical game, but
they
it didn't work.
yeah, they used some
Okay,
some of their moves.
I didn't get the chance to play it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't have any classical games in it, but it's something just that I've analyzed and that I thought was fun.
Totally, yeah. It's
And
always
I,
good to have something like this in the back
yeah.
of the head. I mean, what you,
Mhm.
and with a line like this, how you explained it right now. I
If we
mean,
had more time, I would even show like a game, but maybe we can include it in for people to look on their own.
totally, yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We let's include a game which is played. This
Mm-hmm.
is good. So you can also see this in the ChessBase news article. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
This is very, very helpful because I'm just imagining I have an opponent which plays this opening, and then I'm like, "Ah, I don't feel like, I know that this opponent plays this line very well. I'm not very good with this. Okay, you know what? I'm trying knight c6 now. Let's see." And then I already remember, like, okay, what happens after d5? I know the moves, I know the ideas, I know the strategies now, which you explained. So yeah, this is really, really cool that you have found such an interesting sideline, which is not like a catastrophic gambit in the very
Yeah.
first moves, but it is actually really, really playable. And as you said so correctly, and this is also what I like a lot, is that you mentioned it's playable. So whoever makes the first mistake or whoever is the better chess player will probably win the game as so often, right? That is that's very true. I want to give a quick shout out to Egbert Schör, who's always sharing our videos. Thanks, Egbert. I'm very glad you're enjoying this. And to everybody else who's watching this, thank you so much for your support and for sharing this as well. Yeah, Svitlana, I think we will see each other next week already. Looking forward to this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.